Welcome to the Daily Freedomist Show featuring Paul Gordon Collier. That's me. And we come at you from Freedomist.com. Just touch on some of the stories that we won't be covering today. Just to tease you, we have the will to perceive versus the reality of power. We have the fate of Christians living in atheist China. That's our Christian Headlines report. We have NCAA approves trans student athletes in sports. That's our top stories report. We have the end of Alzheimer's thanks to gene editing. Those are our Freedom Headlines reports and more. And if you want to see everything that we do and where we get all the stories that we talk about here, you just click on the right-hand corner of the Freedomist.com on the News Watch page, and then you can scroll down and you can see all the stories for yourselves. And you can decide for yourselves. So with that in mind, let's get ready for the first story. Daunte Wright narratives emerge along factional lines. Again, this is our topic report. Daunte Wright, the left-right fight for narrative over truth. Daunte Wright's brother, Dallas, doesn't believe police killing was an accident. Straight BS. That's from Newsweek.com. And we have the headline from independent.co.uk. Daunte Wright's mother honors slain son. My heart is broken in 1,000 pieces. I miss him so much, and it's only been a day. From Crooks and Liars. Definitely one of the worst as far as the left is concerned. Molotov cocktail throwers. Fox reporter complains blacks won't accept, quote, justified, unquote, shooting of Daunte Wright. Or, excuse me, justified shooting. Minnesota officer who killed Daunte Wright resigns along with police chief. This is from The Guardian. City council fires city manager over Daunte Wright shooting. This is from Louder with Crowder. Also, I would say kind of like the right in that Crooks and Liars kind of category as far as Molotov cocktail throwing. Black man killed by police in Minnesota was, quote, amazing, loving kid, unquote. This is from News 24. Daunte Wright faced attempted robbery case when killed by cop, allegedly choked woman and held her at good gunpoint. This is from The Blaze. And then we have Fox News host laments. This is from Crooks and Liars again, and I already told you what I think of them. Fox News host laments, quote, poor officer, unquote, who shot Daunte Wright. Now, this is where I want to get to with this story, which is, if you'll notice, I should have had a little bit more right. I thought I had a little bit more right titles on here than showed up, but the general gist here, on one hand you have, as usual, well, of course he's an evil person, he deserved what he got, or it was a justified shooting or whatever. It's not because anything to do with truth, with reason, with logic. Just like on the other side, what they want to do is they want to immediately paint these folks in these situations as saints, and the cops are completely evil, and that's the way it is. And the reason is because on the quote-unquote left, they find a vehicle of power of particular usefulness in continuing to try to dismantle the law and order structures that you see around you, because the law and order structures emerge fundamentally from a Bill of Rights construct, a Bill of Rights vehicle of power, if you will. Very imperfectly, I might add. But the Bill of Rights is a fundamental imposition to how they want to use government as an agent of quick and decisive change that isn't slowed down by something like the Bill of Rights. They're looking to change things on the fly dramatically, and on the right, they support law and order, rule of law, because the Bill of Rights is also, well, it's sustained. It makes it difficult for you to change things. Even when there's an issue, it might be difficult for you to change things. So you have to go through a due process methodology. You have to go through a rule of law methodology, and you have to be held accountable according to King Bill. And King Bill exists outside of the American state, outside of humanity itself in a way. King Bill is as close as we can get to Christ being king. But it's a pale comparison to what Christ is. But I won't get into that. I don't have time for this. These are just short little things here. But there is some truth to be had on all sides, almost always, on the left and the right, so-called left, so-called right, when it comes to these stories. And because they are so rigidly held to their factional positions, they can't allow for the other side to have any measure of truth. So it keeps us in the dark, and we're not able to come to terms with the issues that are, and to look at this through a lens of the reality of power that strips away the moral constructs that the left and the right find so useful to doggedly hold on to, so as to protect their factional interests. I mean, I'm not going to say what I think about this shooting other than what I said yesterday, which is a woman on the police force for 26 years. She held on to that gun for a while, and then she yells, taser, 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 and then she shoots. That doesn't jibe with me. It just doesn't seem right. And if she was that untrained after 26 years and training somebody else in the process, so she's actually training the next generation, I'm glad that the police chief resigned, because there's something fundamentally wrong with that police force. But because the right perceives that any attack on the police is an attack on rule of law, which they're kind of right about, kind of, not exactly, they will have to, they're put into a position where they have to defend the police no matter what, and so they have to demonize Daunte Wright. Meanwhile, the left, they can't look at the inconvenient hard facts of the situation. It is true that Daunte Wright did not just peacefully go along, did seem to go back to the back seat, and it seems to be true. I don't know if this is true. I believe it's true, and I don't want to state my reputation on it, such as that is, that he had a warrant out for his arrest that seems to indicate he was doing some pretty bad things. All of these things should be considered when we're evaluating. Now, by the way, just because of the warrant, I'll say this. I don't believe there's a justification for what happened here. Even if there was an arrest warrant for murder, it's the standard is not that cops act right when it comes to dealing with people who are quote-unquote good. The standard is that they should act right within the bounds of rule of law, even if they're evil, objectively evil, if there could be such a thing. So let's move on. All right, let's get ready for this next story. We're going a little bit worldwide here, although it's related to the United States. Russia warns U.S. to turn back warships heading to the Black Sea. This is our topic report. U.S., Russia, Ukraine tensions. This is from mirror.co.uk. U.S. warships heading to Black Sea warned to turn away for their own good. And Chris Hughes excerpt here. Chris Hughes is the author here. Fears of an all-out war in East Ukraine ramped up yesterday after Russia warned America to stay away from the region for their own good. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rabyov made his aggressive demand as two U.S. destroyers raced towards the flagship, or the Flashpoint region. There's not going to be an all-out war between the United States and Russia because nuclear weapons. Just remember that. Russia concerned over emergence of Turkish combat drones, and there they are. There's the drones. Whenever you see the drones, when you see drones appear, in which you have the interest of multiple powers involved outside of that region, there's a good chance that you're going to see some degree of conflict, because these nation states constantly use the blood of others to test their little toys. So if you start to see combat drones, yeah, you're going to have some issues. So the Turks are putting combat drones. I mean, I don't know if they're going to get their S-400s. That's the air defense missile system that the Turks purchased from Russia. But let's see if they actually get it. From Defense Blog, Dylan Mayosa says, the Kremlin said on Tuesday that it dismayed over Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 drone systems in the Donbass region of Ukraine. Obviously, there can hardly be anything to rejoice about, given that Turkish drones, as the story goes, are surfacing somewhere in Donbass. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said. You won't see, well, there may very well be Russian troops doing things, but not openly. You'll see Russian separatists and you'll see Ukrainian loyalists that will fight the proxy war on behalf of, on one side, the United States and whatever, and on the other side, Turkey and, well, the United States and maybe Turkey, and on the other side, Russia and whoever. So it'll be a proxy war, another proxy war, and they'll be able to test their new toys on the blood of people that don't live under their lands. It's preferable that way because you get less direct protests that way. So less political fallout in your own lands when you test your toys using the blood of others and not your own citizens. Russia says troop buildup near Ukraine is a response to NATO, from Washington Post. Speaking at a meeting with the top military brass, Shoigu said the ongoing exercise was a response to what he claimed were continuous efforts by the United States and its NATO allies to beef up their forces near Russia's borders. NATO chief criticizes Russian military buildup. This is from the New York Times. Let's see. NATO chief you're just going to repeat that again. Okay, here we go. And you repeat it again. Okay. So here we go. Here is the actual person. Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, expressed concerns over Russia's increased military presence along the border with Ukraine, calling it unexplained and unjustified. Russia's considerable military buildup is unjustified, unexplained, and ... I'm not going to click on it. You get the idea. I don't think you see anymore. Biden tells Putin to stand down in Ukraine during dramatic phone call after Russia told U.S. to keep away for their own good. Did Biden do that? He managed that? That's good for him. They must be getting him some good drugs, because I've seen him and he looks a little bit more cognizant than usual, which I guess is good. I guess. From the Sun UK, Joe Biden has told Vladimir Putin to stand down in Ukraine hours after Russia told the U.S. to keep away for their own good. And you see the story up here. U.S. warships told to turn away for their own good. I mean, Russia's not going to bomb the warships, and the warships aren't going to bomb the Russians. That's just what the warships will do, is use whatever technology, whatever they can, to aid the Ukrainians in controlling the intelligence airspace, if you will, so that they can network and do whatever they got to do. They'll do that, but there will be no direct war between Russia and the United States. And if there is, I will eat everybody's hats. In only the second conversation between the two sides since Biden took office in January, the U.S. president warned the Russian leader to de-escalate tensions. Top Kremlin mouthpiece warns of inevitable war with U.S. over another Ukraine land grab. This is from Futurology. And let's see, the cyber attacks will not be ingenuitive. Wow, ingenuitive, huh? Let's look up the word ingenuitive. I mean, I want to see how that is. Let's see, ingenuitive. Let's see. Inventive skill or imagination. I guess it's ingenious. Maybe that's another word for ingenious. Well, there you go. That's pretty cool. Learn a new word. There you go. And then we have here unprecedented footage shows front line of Ukrainian conflicts with Russia from CNN. And finally, this is a repeat. Biden calls on Putin to de-escalate tensions with Ukraine in phone conversation. Let's get to the next story. Another world story here that we're going to cover. And I think it's definitely one worth watching. Iran threatens to weaponize nuclear power to, quote, fight evil. Yeah, everybody likes to frame everything within their moral constructs. And their moral constructs are what they use to justify murdering their neighbors for reasons that fall outside of Romans 13. I'm going to repeat this stuff over and over again. It's just what I do. Iran Natanz nuclear site suffered major damage, officials say, from the bbc.co.uk. His successor, Joe Biden, has said he wants to return to the landmark accord, but Iran and the 5 other world powers still party to it. China, France, Germany, whatever. I'm not going to read all the names. Screw that. Need to find a way for him to lift U.S. sanctions and for Iran to return to the table. Natan's blackout, new negotiating leverage or setback. Mark Levin, the Fauci of NYC. Wow. Is he calling Mark Levin the Fauci of NYC? I don't get it. This is from JewishInsider.com. This is Iran Watch. New leverage or diplomatic setback. Washington debates impact of Natan's blackout. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. I don't have a picture there that they're talking about. Iran vows to increase uranium enrichment after attack. This is really the relevant points coming up here. Iran vows to increase uranium enrichment after attack on nuclear site. Also from the New York Times. I think another story up here was from. Nope, not in this one. So this is David E. Sanger, and William J. Broad. Iran said Tuesday that they would begin enriching uranium to a level of 60% purity, 3 times the current level and much closer to that needed to make a bomb, though American officials doubt the country has the ability to produce such a thing. I'll just say such a thing. Iran may have destroyed Iranian centrifuges simply by cutting... Israel may have destroyed Iranian centrifuges simply by cutting power. And so this is a Redditor commenter saying, I believe so. I want to say that the previous joint U.S. and Israeli cyber attacks that tricked the operators with fake data and ran the centrifuges to destruction were Siemens. Wow, that's interesting. So is that a U.S. firm there, Siemens? Totally open to a fact check on that. If not domestic, probably Russia or China provided or supported. So this is the notion that the U.S. aided in this. And I don't know, it's complicated. I have to think a lot more and find out more information to determine if I actually believe that is the case. Iran set to enrich uranium to highest level ever after attack at nuclear facility blamed on Israel. From Sky News, Iran says it will increase its enrichment of uranium to 60% purity. And it's basically repeating. I'm just showing you, giving you the confirmation. More and more people are. Seems to be a legit report on as far as that front is concerned. World War III fears. There's not going to be any World War III unless and until people figure out how to neutralize nuclear weapon threats. And boy, when that happens, well, and it's all on. It'll be a short war. Well. Never mind, I won't get into that. That's too long. What does this mean? Iran expects to produce uranium enrichment to 60% purity next week, as confirmed by Kazem Garibabi. Garibabi. Its ambassador to the United Nations nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iran's uranium enrichment program could mean the country is on its way to building an arsenal of nuclear weapons. And then finally, Iranian president calls 60% uranium enrichment an answer to evil. Listen, when you're talking about nation states that fall outside of Romans 13, all of them that fall outside of Romans 13 with their actions in any way, shape, or form, by God's standards, they're evil. And I would argue that almost, probably every, but at least almost every nation state is quote-unquote evil. So he's just really qualifying that, whether he knows it or not, that no, they're more evil than us. I'm sure he would disagree with me. Iran's president has called Tehran's decision to enrich uranium up to 60% after saboteurs attacked a nuclear site an answer to your evilness, linking the incident to ongoing talks in Vienna over its tattered nuclear deal with world powers. Israel, which has not commented on the attack, is suspected of carrying out. Something a little bit different here. We're going to have 7 stories today, and we'll do that whenever we have our editor produce an editorial of size that we can put onto, put in our video form. So here we go. We have such a thing. Our insane defense budget. This is an opinion piece by Bill Collier, our editor. So I am reading our editor, who happens to also be my identical twin. So he knows I'm doing this. It's cool, folks. It's cool. Our defense budget is insane. We spend too much on defense. There are 3 reasons for this. 1, the defense industry pillages and plunders us with inflated costs and mass inefficiency. 2, the military structure has the logistical tail wagging the war-fighting dog. 3, we are empowering our enemies economically, which increases their defense budgets. Yeah, China, looking at you. We need a strong Navy and strategic Air Force, but as for land warfare, a small army backed by a mostly voluntary militia and part-time constabulary and National Guard force. We need real reform on the defense procurement process. We need to have a 4-to-1 ratio of warfighters to support personnel. We can have an overwhelming defense that is proof against any and all enemies and that keeps our sea lanes clear and safe for commerce and to and from our country. So we can continue to be which I'm not against that, well, within the nation-state parameters, keep the sea lanes open around the world. We need to stop basing troops overseas and defending foreign countries. We need to stop spending too much, paying too high a price, being massively inefficient, and defending foreign countries in ways that do us no good. As for enemies like China, we need total economic separation from them. Our economic entanglement with them renders us vulnerable and grows their power. Well, keep paying attention if you're watching this. Well, keep paying attention to the show because, and if you're watching this clip video form, yeah, go to the Freedomist YouTube channel, the one with the black and gold, and you'll find a playlist that has all of our shorts on it because we post on different channels. And you'll see what we have coming up. We're going to talk a little bit more about China and the DNC, the love-hate relationship that those two have. So it's a complicated issue. China is an enemy, and we must cut them off. Although I totally agree with him, China is an enemy. Oh, let me go back here. As for enemies like China, we need total economic separation from them. Our economic entanglement with them renders us vulnerable and grows their power. These totalitarian criminals who treat the world as spoil are reprehensible, and we must treat them like dirt because they are execrable lowlifes. Well, and he does mean the state, the Chairman Z and his power, not the people themselves. China is an enemy, and we must cut them off and possibly block every effort on their part to engage the world economy short of any act of war. There is zero reason to have normalized relations with China. They, the government, not the people, there you go, are evil. Period. There's that evil thing again, but yeah, I'd say China on the scale of evil is pretty high up there. The state, not the people. Empowering our enemies like China and Russia economically is a major reason why our defense budget is growing. We are funding their military expansion and then using that to justify our own excessive military budget, which has these other flaws built into it, such as inflated price from suppliers and massive inefficiencies of organization. People are starving or die without good health care because we let defense industries pillage us through inflated prices, because we have more logistical people than warfighters, and because we economically empower our enemies, all the while expanding our defense mission beyond what is useful to our own country. I completely concur with the editor of the Freedomist, Bill Collier, on that. As his identical twin, I assure you that my views, and also an employee of the Freedomist, I can assure you that, well, amongst other things, but yeah, I can assure you that, yeah, I'm not biased. Not at all. He's right. He's right, you know. The emergence of corporate nationalism around voting rights laws. And this is an assembly of news links, but hopefully you'll be able to see my point here through this assemblage of news links and how it is that other people are starting to maybe get that clue. They have nobody else outside of the Freedomists is calling them corporate nationalists, and I sure hope that happens. And if you see this video and you like this video, make sure you share it and share the truth. That this is corporate nationalism that we're observing here, which is very, dare I say, quote, right wing, unquote. This is how the quote left is becoming more right than the right is. It's complicated, folks. It's not just Georgia. More than a dozen other states are trying to take power away from local election officials. This is from the left. This is 538.com. This is how they're branding it. Trying to take power away from local election officials. Or you could word it, trying to protect the American electoral process from becoming a banana republic that has no accountability, in which nobody other than the people in power will have any confidence that there is a system with integrity through which they can express their political views, which ultimately is what voting is, allegedly, in the American state. Georgia faith leaders to meet today with CEOs over state's new voting laws. This is from WTVY.com. This is insane. These are not faith leaders. These are heretics. These are liars. I could say that if you feel that you want to, in the name of Christ, go and join yourself up with anything to do with the DNC. I'm not saying you should join the RNC crowd, but this is a DNC project. If you feel that aligns with Christ, well, I can't call you a faith leader. And I'm not talking about Christians that identify as DNC. I have a lot more understanding of rank and file folks than I do quote-unquote leaders. Whole other standard when it comes to leaders. Backlash against Georgia's new voter law continues. Today, faith leaders in the Peach State say they're meeting with CEOs of Georgia-based. Now, you should really say, if you're really going to be honest, these are progressive, and progressive Christians are nominal at best. They don't even acknowledge the sovereignty of Christ. Many of them don't even believe that Christ was both man and divine at the same time. So this use of the phrase faith leaders does not, and this is from WTVY.com. So this is a local news outlet that is choosing to write a straight piece with a lot of propaganda, agitprop thrown in it. It is intended to make you rather than serve you. This is a dishonest news organization that posts something like this. But that's not uncommon. Today, faith leaders in the Peach State say they're meeting with CEOs of Georgia-based companies to talk to them to speak up against the law. These same progressive whatevers that have been decrying the power, and I think rightly so, of these mega corporations, these international unaccountable corporations, corporate nationalists, are now, because the corporate nationalists are empowering their interests. Now, when you look at the world as I do through the reality of power, you're not confused by this. You don't try to understand people through their stated beliefs. You try to understand people through the reality of power. You understand what their vehicles of power are, and it makes a lot more sense why it is that suddenly the progressives are suddenly pro-corporations and suddenly the Republicans are interested in antitrust laws. Anti-baseball, here's a case in point. This is from the Daily Kos, which is one of these rabble-rousing, this is a Marat-type organization here. And if you watch all my other videos, you'll know that I mentioned Marat quite a lot, because Marat is from the French Revolution, newspaper man who wrote a lot of incendiary lies to incite people to violence. And I think that's what Daily Kos is doing here. Carrie Elveland is the one that's responsible for this agitprop hate. Senators Mike Lee of Utah, Ted Cruz of Texas, and Josh Hawley of Missouri announced an effort to punish MLB by removing its antitrust shield. Lee said the legal exemption had been created from whole cloth by the Supreme Court nearly 100 years ago. Cruz, a perennial huffer. You know what huffers are? They take in, they sniff paint and glue. I mean, that's who this guy is. That's Carrie. Good job, Carrie. The woke corporations are coming for election integrity. That's what the right writes. And maybe there's a degree. I think I'm more aligned with the right on this issue, which isn't always the case. But in this case, I think I am more aligned with them. But I wish that you would say, instead of woke corporations, because it's not really about woke. The wokeness is just the vehicle of power. What it really is corporate nationalism, which I can almost guarantee you, once they have the corporate national power, they will jettison the woke. And the reason they'll jettison the woke, because the woke is an ideology of destroying what is. And once they have consolidated power, they will They will no longer be interested in the woke, in what I'm calling their green shirts. The green shirts will have to go. At some point, Hitler and Rom parted ways. And the brown shirts disappeared on the night of the long knives. I don't know if they'll have a night of long knives, but who knows? Maybe they will. So it's really about corporate nationalism. The wokeness is just their convenient vehicle of power that they're using now. And then we have hundreds of companies unite to oppose voting limits, but others abstain. From New York Times, notice that abstain. This is moral judgment. New York Times is doing more rabble-rousing here, where they're trying to socially and morally shame the corporations that are not joining in with the corporate nationalism. Reuters, quote unquote, fact check, quote, rushes to defend Democrat H.R. 1 voting bill from the right, from Newsbusters, and then from the left, finally from 538 again. Are ambitious parts of Democrats' agenda good for democracy, or just the Democratic Party? Now that is a very good question from you, 538. You should, Sarah, good title there, Sarah. And I'll leave it at that. There's a little bit taste of what's going on. Get to this story. How the BLM narrative affects our ability to think and act free in America. This is a topic report. And I touched on this a little bit earlier when it came to how it is that the factions are preventing us from having an adult conversation about policing in America. Because the right perceives that it must defend the police at all costs, because the left is using attacks on the police to undermine more than just bad police behavior. They're seeking to undermine the notion of the Bill of Rights itself. And this, and then on the left, they have to defend everyone and anyone that is involved, well, every black man that is involved in a police shooting, no matter what. They have to bury the truth. They have to prevent us from really understanding the nuances, because they are absolutely seeking to destroy King Bill, because King Bill is an impediment to their agenda. Then we have this. BLM, America, and You. Rashida Tlaib steps up to offer an absolute insane take on the Daunte Wright shooting. This is from Red State. This is a Wright from the right. The shooting of Daunte Wright in Minneapolis, which appears to have been an accidental... Oh my gosh. An accidental... This is what I'm talking about from the right. There you go. To have been an accident... Appears to have been... Again, they have to defend this territory. So they have to make him bad. They have to make her good, the police officer involved, because they're protecting King Bill, or they think they're protecting King Bill. But never mind that the right never consistently follows the Bill of Rights itself, and no faction does. Well, I would argue no faction does. Which appears to have been an accidental discharge after he attempted to flee from police in a car, has already led to rioting and looting. Last night, things got out of hand again. The media made excuses, and the city council voted to prohibit police. I don't know. You're not going to get to the point. You should have just got it right there in the little excerpt for me. And here's louder with Crowder, one of the worst on the right. Protester destroys CNN live on air. Get the F out of here. And maybe the protester kind of understands that a lot of these, especially the black people, that when I see a bunch, I've said this before, when it's a bunch of white people burning down buildings in the name of social injustice or whatever, I'm highly skeptical of their motivations. These are mostly well-to-do suburbanite kids living out their reckless war fantasies. But in general, when you see a bunch of black people in a poor neighborhood that are going out and doing things, these folks have all kinds of legitimate reasons to be truly, truly frustrated. But I would love to see studies on how police treat people in poor communities across the country. And I think that what black Americans are going to be surprised to find is that white Americans in poor communities experience many of the same type of discriminations. This is really about power. It's about perceptions of power. Now, I will say, I also believe that there is something beyond merely, I guess maybe merely the difference between poor and people of means, in that I do think that there is still ongoing stigmatizations regarding black Americans and police. I suspect that police have they're simply more afraid of black people than they are white people. And they're more ready to believe the worst about black people than white people. And I think that's a real problem in policing today. And I love to have those conversations, but it's difficult. It's difficult because the minute that you say, okay, I kind of agree to this, the quote-unquote left, mostly white suburbanites, will use that to say something insane like, Democrat Rashida Tlaib calls for no more policing. No more policing following the shooting death of Daunte Wright. And this is from ChristianHeadlines.com. Democrat Rashida Tlaib calls for no more policing. Yeah, called for no more policing policy. No more policing after a 20-year-old black man named Daunte Wright was fatally shot by Minnesota police officer Saturday. And this is the BLM narrative is basically, listen, there is systemic, hateful racism across the board everywhere. There's this thing called whiteness that we have to stamp out. Now, I want you to think about the logic. If you're a white person, if you're a white American, what the BLM has constantly been saying on one hand is you can't be white because white is whiteness, and whiteness is a fundamentally evil thing. And then white people can't culturally appropriate. So what is the alternative? It's death. It's death. It's simply death. And that's, I think white people are getting that message. So because of this, white people, understandably, I'm still going to, especially amongst my Christian friends, not rightly, but understandably, they don't want to hear about racism. They don't want to hear about the real underlying cause, so-called. Now, I know when the BLM uses systemic racism, it's certainly way more invidious than how I think of it in my head. But there is systemic racism, and I do believe amongst policing, in the policing world, yeah, there's systemic racism, that black people are much more at risk when they get pulled over to have something bad happen to them merely because of the color of their skin. But white Americans can't have that conversation. You can if you're a Christian, because if you're a Christian, you align with Christ. You don't align with these powers. Come what may, we align with the truth. And the truth is that there is systemic racism in police departments, as I see it, not in the same way that the BLM uses that term. But we can't have those conversations because white people are afraid. They're afraid of giving any more ground than they perceive that they already have, because every time they've given ground, the militants have stepped into the void and said, whiteness. And they're instituting in our schools a program where they're telling white babies about their sin skins, about their whiteness, and about the sin skins of their parents, and driving divisions in families, creating hostility and hatred between children and their parents. It's pretty horrible what's going on. And I'm still going to align with truth, come what may. And so the BLM is preventing us as the and BLM is absolutely corporate. It is corporate nationalism. They are corporate nationalists. They're funded by corporate nationalists. They serve the corporate nationalists. The corporate nationalists are using them to consolidate their power even more. The black Americans who serve in the BLM are serving mostly white billionaires, and they don't really understand that. And we're not able, once again, just like with policing, we're not able to have adult, nuanced conversations about quote-unquote race in America. And I think I'll end my report there. Oh man, I meant to turn my microphone off before I did that snotberry. I'm sorry about the snotberry, folks. I do try to turn the mic off, and I think I have a bit of a cold right now. No, I mean, let's hope it's not coronavirus. I don't think it is, but it could be one of those I get little hay fever colds, little allergic kind of things going on, so it might be that too. That's probably what it is. China's, well, let me try and record this first. I got to record this. China's alignment and friction with DNC America. So topic report. China-U.S. tensions versus China-DNC alignment. This is from the Free Beacon. Chinese propagandists tout New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman's comments. Chinese state media are trumpeting New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman's China-friendly comments, the latest example of the gray lady's ties to the China propaganda or apparatus, absolutely. When Friedman, a longtime columnist for the Times, participated in March 29th fireside chat with the Center for China and Globalization. That's a Beijing think tank group. Yeah. This is now remember, these are the quote-unquote left. These are the moral supremacists. These are the ones that have been using morality as a bludgeon to beat most of the poorest. I mean, these almost always in any given situation, wherever any system seeks to rule coercively using moral supremacism as its guide, the people who end up suffering the most, who end up being limited the most, are the poorest. The wealthy can buy special dispensations, the poorest cannot. So Thomas Friedman is a billionaire enabler and also a fascist enabler because he is enabling China, while he pretends to be one of the moral supremacist leftists of America. Chinese state media are okay. When Friedman, a long-time columnist for the Times, okay, where are we getting to? Where are we left off? Here we go. So he's talking to the Beijing think tank. The state-owned China Global Television Network broadcast the entire 60-minute, I think he meant. 90-minute interview. Once the interview was over, the network disseminated the interview as an example of a Western intellectual calling for improved relations between the superpowers. Freedom said 1979 to 2019 was a golden era of global prosperity and peace with the U.S. and China at the core, and the two countries need to find ways to work together for the sake of the world's development. Because the corporate nationalists are relying fundamentally on the Chinese market to enable them they'll create a product that serves the Chinese audience, but they will create products over here that make American audiences. This is unaccountable nationalism let loose in America and enabled and funded and supported by the Democrat National Committee, the DNC. Well, I'll call it a corporation. It's a corporation. And it gets complicated. It gets very complicated. When you look over here, U.S. government concerned China's digital yuan could threaten dollar as the world's dominant reserve currency. This is Bitcoin.com. Now, there's a number of things going on in here when you see, because I know that when you talk about how the DNC is absolutely in bed with China, it's not like the DNC is interested in rolling over and playing dead for China. You're talking about two wolves, two vicious wolves that find usefulness in each other, but at the first chance they get will literally rip each other to shreds. And I do believe that China helped very much the DNC win the mass mailer election, such as that was. But that doesn't mean that China has a trump card over the DNC and they can blackmail them. They can't. Because if it were to be exposed in America that China really did help the DNC, the immediate response from America after they removed the DNC from power would be war with China. And I don't want that. So the DNC has cards on them. They have cards on them. There's mutual assured destruction to a certain degree. But within those parameters, China and the U.S. can still play. And they're playing a very serious game. The DNC ultimately hopes to use China's power to enable it to subvert the American people, to kill King Bill, the Bill of Rights, the only king that matters in this country, the only leader in this country that matters is King Bill, the Bill of Rights. And once that's done, they do not intend on being second class to China. The corporate nationalists that have thrown in together, they do not intend on the United States of America being a Chinese vassal state. They intend on the United States of America being a corporate nationalist state. So it's complicated. So you're going to see stories, and these stories are legit. And the Biden administration, such as that is interested in undermining Chinese power, even as it relies on it. So you'll see one hand saying Thomas Friedman, while the other hand is saying government concerns about Chinese digital yuan. And I want to add this as well. There's something called, well, my brother and I, we refer to this, and I'm talking about the editor of the Freedomist, my brother, identical twin Bill Collier. We refer to this, we have our own version of dialecticalism, and our dialecticalism in a strategic power sense is the dialectical tactic is to go in the opposite direction that people think you would be doing if you were taking a certain turn. So, for instance, if you really were in partnership with China and you didn't want people to know, you're going to give some token resistance. So there's some of that going on as well. But I think it's more than that. I do think that there is legitimate competition between these two, and both of these two. And by these two, when I say the DNC is essentially corporate nationalism at this point. That's what it is. Forget the woke stuff. Concentrate on the fact that they're corporate. That's what they really are, corporate nationalists. Unaccountable, power that enables the billionaires to assure that they'll never have to face competition again. And neither China nor the corporate nationalists of America envision a world in which the other exists. I can assure you that. And I think that maybe I'll get one more. Biden admin gives valuable defense contract to China collaborator from Free Beacon. The Biden administration awarded a lucrative defense contract to a Singaporean company that works with Chinese military firms. Why would you even think to do that? Why would we even think as Americans to hand over all of our critical medical production to China? It's because we are not ruled by Americans. We are ruled by corporate nationalists, and they have no nation outside of the one that's in their head. They have no accountability outside of pure, unadulterated, violent power. Outside of that, they have no accountability, and they have no desire to have any accountability, because these people are fundamentally averse to competition. They're anti-competitionalists is essentially what they are. Their version of quote-unquote capitalism and China's version of quote-unquote communism are both the same thing, anti-competitionalism. And there you go. And there you go indeed, folks. And with that, we come to the end of our show. And I want to encourage you once again to go to Freedomist.com. Make sure you go to this Newswatch page. You go to the right-hand corner, click on the Newswatch page. You get all the links up here. And you can decide for yourself what you think. And you can get from a broad range of sources, which is what you need, because almost all of these sources are liars. Almost all of these sources are trying to make you and not serve you. But if you read them from that perspective, even propaganda can yield truths that the propagandist doesn't want you to get. And with that, I'll thank you all very much for joining us here on the Daily Freedomist Show. This has been Paul Gordon Collier from Freedomist.com.